Donna, good afternoon. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I am well, although I didn't
Good.
end up going to the gym this morning, and I really, really, really wanted to.
So why didn't you go to the gym? Tell me why.
Um, can I tell you the reason that makes me look like a superhero instead of like some lazy ass person?
Absolutely not. I want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
You can't handle the truth. No, I actually had to run a couple of errands, and because traffic was bad, I was thinking, okay, I'm not going to be able to make it back in time because I hate doing a half workout. So I said, okay, I'll do a full workout later on. So I went from dealing with traffic to now probably going to have to deal with a busier gym session.
Mm. What are you
Yeah.
working on today? Just out of curiosity. What body part?
Ooh, I want to do. It's winter, so you don't need to do chest because everyone's fully clothed. So
You still have to work the chest.
I'll think I do the arms. You still show
Okay.
some arms in the winter months, in the cold months, right? A
Okay.
little bit of shoulders, maybe just fix
Okay.
my posture.
Okay.
Yeah, so I can do that. A little bit maybe. But you're here, crazy, crazy childhood story from what you've highlighted so far. So why don't we jump right into that because cannot wait. I'm so excited to hear this crazy, crazy story. So introduce yourself, Donna. Tell my audience a little bit about who you are and, of course, where they can find you.
So my name is Donna Hall. I have a new podcast that I'm in the process of recording and hopefully releasing by the time this episode airs. It's called the Hall Closet Podcast, and you'll be able to find me on all the platforms under that name. Um, a little bit about me. I come from a lower, I always hate to say lower, I always hate to say crime family, but the reality is I grew up in a lower tier crime family, not the typical crime family that you would, think there, we weren't in the mob or there weren't, you know, people dealing drugs or guns. I mean, there were guns, but, it wasn't what you would think of when you think of crime family. Very different. And we can get into that. And of course, if you want to learn more, you'll just have to follow me and listen to my podcast.
I know, right? That's like the plug. Listen to her, follow her if you want to hear more. I love it. Now we're gonna like put that on a t-shirt, like I kind of have, like behind the shades there. Cheap
Yeah, I
plug,
love
cheap
it.
plug. So take us through the genesis of this. This was in your childhood. So how did that impact your childhood looking back on it?
So I think what's different about me, so I grew up in a I would say middle to lower class town right outside of Philadelphia. And I was the second to youngest of five children. Now we all have different fathers. So it wasn't like a close-knit family like, a lot of people have. Like, there wasn't a mother and a father and all these kids. It was various different fathers from all over the place. Um, and you asked me what it was like looking back on that. Is that right? Is that what you just asked me? So I would say what was different about me than my siblings is I always knew that this wasn't normal. So I feel like my siblings, who are great people, and they've, grown up and done various different things with their lives, I just don't know that they understood at the time. I feel like they just thought that this was what life was. Um, Now I'm speaking for them. I just know and I really don't want to speak for them, but I'm just going to speak for myself and the fact that as things were happening, I was like, this can't be fucking real. Like, this isn't right. This isn't the way that life should be. Now, whether I knew came to that conclusion because I saw other families that weren't like this, or what I more strongly believe is that where I came from, um, my genes, my mother had an artificial insemination. So I found out in my 40s that I was donor conceived. And in my 40s, it kind of all made sense. Like now I understand why that never resonated with me, why this life was not for me, how I always knew. Does that make sense?
It does, because it puts into light how when you're growing up, from what you're sharing, is that there was a different dynamic. I'm trying to be like politically correct, right? There's like a different
Good.
dynamic to your upbringing. Like you had different fathers. Was it the same mother
Same
for
mom.
everyone? Same mom for everyone. So it wasn't like there was like an adopted brother or sister. It was the same mother, all these different fathers. Which unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, it's still that is still something that happens now, right? Like there's some people who have
Yeah.
multiple children from different fathers. But for you, once you realize what was actually going on in your family, were you shocked, or was it more so, okay, things make a little bit more sense now?
I was not shocked at all. I mean, I was shocked that I have, I was shocked that I found out that I was 50% Ashkenazi Jew. I had absolutely no idea. So yeah, that was shocking, but no, it wasn't shocking because I felt at all times throughout my childhood that I didn't belong, that I wasn't a part of anything. I always felt different. I felt judged. I felt I had different values, different even down to like the clothes that I wore. Like I just felt different. As a child, I felt like I didn't belong. Looking back, I'm like so grateful. I'm so grateful that I come from different genes because I feel like had I not, I may have gone down a different path, like like one of my siblings in particular. But, I think I could have possibly gone down a different path.
You
So,
mentioned you mentioned that it's not like you were part of like the Godfather family,
right.
right? But there was
Yeah.
some crime in the family, and there was some participation in that. And depending on the extent of it, um, it doesn't seem like it was too serious, but it's serious enough that it had an impact on everyone involved in the family. Is that a correct assessment?
I would say it had a pretty big impact because it made national news three separate times. Did it make an impact in the family? Every single day of my life was impactful as far as, abuse, neglect, abandonment. But as far as the crime piece, it was more, I didn't realize that until I was later, like, holy shit. Like, this was crime. These are criminals that I, grew up with, and was surrounded by, to the point where, there was jail time and, pretty horrific events that led up to some of the times that they were in jail. My sister was left home alone. That was pretty horrible. But interestingly enough, while it on the outside seemed really horrible, it was just part of the course where I, for my family. So while everyone from the outside was like, holy shit, this woman left her daughter home alone at 12 years old with no heat. And she's, living in the city with her boyfriend. And her 12-year-old daughter is home alone, going to school every single day, making the honor roll, doing all the right things. In our family, it was like, yeah, that's our life, if that makes sense.
It does. There's a scene in a movie, I forget the name of it, where there's a young man, he goes to pick up the daughter from the house of the parents, and the parents are like, they're into criminal activity, and he has to kind of like pass this quote unquote test, right? Like they test his manhood to make sure that he's strong enough and courageous enough. And I know there's a lot of people that when they hear some of these crime stories, they think, oh my God, it's so sexy. You know what? If I go date the daughter or date the son, I'm going to be on private jets. I'm going to be driving Ferraris. As soon as I walk into the restaurant, they have a table for me. Top of the notch lifestyle, right? But for you, like you went through it. How did being a part of this family impact your relationships during that time?
So during that time, as far as when I was growing up, um, it wasn't the crime. There wasn't any glory or glam to this type of lifestyle. We were known, um, in fact, we were known to be the criminal family. We were known to be the family that all the children were supposed to stay away from our house. One of the things, and I do talk about it on my, in my story, because it's pretty impactful to me, is my very best friend growing up as a toddler, going into kindergarten and first grade. My very best friend who lived a couple houses up from me, eventually wasn't allowed to play with me anymore. And, I had to watch from the window her play with all the other kids in the street who weren't allowed to play with me. And it wasn't me, but at the time I felt like, what did I do wrong? So when you ask about how did it impact relationships, I always felt like it was my fault. I never understood at the time, why don't they want to play with me? Why can't these kids come over? Why can't I have a sleepover? Why can't I even go out in the front lawn and play kickball or smoke cigarettes like they were doing, or, when the ice cream man came, like we used to run over to the ice cream man, get our ice cream. He would flick the cigarette out the window and we would go pick it up and smoke it, and those times were done for me. I wasn't allowed to do that. No hide and seek, no war, no playing in the creek. I was alone. It was pretty sad at the time. Again, that's it. It didn't really, I didn't understand it.
How long would you say that impacted you in your life?
Um, until now. I would
See,
say that I still struggle with blaming myself. I still have that, I blame myself for things that go wrong, and I'm very, very, very hard on myself. And I do believe that that was just because I never had the normalcy. I didn't have anyone telling me this is going to be okay. I love you. Doesn't matter that I as a mom now, so I'm 48 years old. As a mom now, when my children were growing up, if they had a fight with their friend, my job was to love my kids through that and explain to them and tell them this friend might not be able to play with you because who knows what, maybe they're mad at you, maybe, whatever the reason is, people fight, right? I never had that. I never had someone loving me through. And if you asked me, how did my childhood impact me as a parent? While I most certainly am not the perfect parent, I made a shit ton of mistakes. I think loving my children no matter what unconditionally has been the biggest gain that I've ever gotten from it. I will never ever walk away from my kids. I will never ever allow them to feel like I've abandoned them ever.
when I hear stories like yours and the impact that it has on the adulthood of that person, you at least for me, I feel like tied into it, pulled into it because you have someone here that had a childhood which is totally out of their control. And then you realize how much it impacts their adulthood, which for a lot of people, in a lot of ways, is totally within your control. And now you're mentioning that as a child, I wasn't able to do this. I didn't have these types of relationships. Now, as an adult, you still see how you still don't have these types of relationships, right? Like there's a lot of blame. And I wonder how much of that is how we can soothe ourselves, saying that I went through this as a child. You know what? It was my fault. And because you're identifying it as your fault, then at least you can come up with ways to correct it or resolve it, right? But if let's say, Donna, I was the one causing you pain, and you said that okay, it's Terrain's fault I'm going through this, then you need me to correct it, no matter how hard you try, right? You're like, Terrain, come on, you're hurting me, you're damaging me this way. But if I'm totally like, yeah, Donna, shut up. right? Like you're still gonna
Yeah,
have that
right.
trauma. But if you identify the trauma as your own, you can say, okay, you know what, this is my fault. How am I going to fix it? And as you mentioned, I'm going to be there for my children. I'm going to make sure they have X. I'm going to make sure that they have Y. How much of the blame that you put on yourself is still hindering you from maybe being the person that you want to be, or even the
Ugh.
parent that you're pushing yourself to become?
I would say, I'm a big believer in I don't give a shit what your childhood was like. We are all adults. You have to take responsibility for who you are and what you do now. However, when you experience significant trauma, pain, abandonment, among other abuses as a child, you store that within your body, right? Like within your brain. It's stored in my brain. I might not remember these details, but it's in me still. So I still to this day struggle with abandonment issues. I don't know how to have the best relationship with men. It's definitely caused me to put up with abuse that uh it's I don't want to say it's caused me. Let me rephrase that. It's allowed me to stay in that comfortability of being abused. So it's almost like I freeze. I'm in a relationship. I'm a strong, independent woman. I can do anything. I support myself. I raise my kids. Work. I don't need a man for a single thing, but I want someone to love me still. I'm still this 5-year-old little girl who wants someone to choose me, to love me, to make me feel important. And I think that what I wanted to share with you, because I know we had talked about childhood and, the impacts that it has, while I've made huge strides, I still have a long way to go. I still have a really long way to go. And I have recently met a woman who, she's from Australia. She's this amazing human being. Tracy Burns is her name. And we had a conversation about therapy. I've been in therapy since I was 15 years old or even younger. Gosh, I think I was 12 years old. I was in a mental institution. So I've been in therapy ever since, on and off throughout the years. I feel like there's something beyond therapy that needs to happen because we store it while we can intellectualize all of these things. We can intellectualize this abandonment. I understand and know, Donna, this man is not good for you. You need to walk away. Like you are better than that. There's something deep, deep, deep inside of me, or there was something deep, deep, deep inside of me that still wasn't able to pull away, that wasn't able to like stand up for myself, to give the boundaries and be like, you know what? Don't treat me that way. That is not how that's not how you talk to me. So I feel like there's some deeper work that needs to be done. And whether it's somatic work, I do a lot of guided meditation that has helped me. I want to say that that's probably the biggest, aside from therapy, I think guided meditation has been like made the biggest impact on my healing and has helped me, as well as the gym. Going to the gym, man. When you said you missed the gym, I was like, I missed the gym this morning too, for very similar reasons to you, because I didn't want to be late and I have a big night ahead of me. And I feel it. I feel it when I don't go to the gym. I feel that like I need to go. I need to feel that empowerment. It's a place that, excuse me, that you can go and absolutely be in control of what you're doing, how much you work out, how hard you work out. It's like my therapy for sure.
I use the gym for the same thing, as well as I took up boxing. So anytime I have like a
Ooh.
stressful day, I put all my stresses in that punching bag and I just do like 6 rounds and I feel incredible afterwards because I've let it all go. For me, you mentioned abandonment issues. One thing I wanted to touch on, which I love that you shared that, is that I grew up without my mother and my father. So I felt the same thing growing up. And then I realized in my childhood, like when my romantic relationships would go left and the person was implying, but not necessarily outright, letting me know that maybe this isn't working out, or if I was going through a difficult time with them, and then you would see them, with someone else, or a picture conveniently would pop up with someone else. You feel like betrayed. You feel abandoned because how can they leave you without actually leaving you on an emotional, on a physical level? And one thing I asked myself is that looking back, I said, Train, what kind of love did you need as a child? And what kind of love do you need as an adult? And I was able to answer those questions and I came up with two different answers, which I found interesting. So if I were to ask you, Donna, when you're going through it as a child, what kind of love do you think you needed then versus what kind of love do you think you need now?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I'm going to say, I think as a child, I needed unconditional love. I needed someone to love me no matter what mistakes I made. I needed someone to hear me, see me, value me, care about me, take care of me if I was sick or if I was sad or if I needed help. So I guess that would be unconditional love. What love do I need now as an adult from a partner, as opposed to my children? Oh,
That is always the more difficult one of the two.
wow. I don't know if it really differs for me. I feel like I want someone to love me, see me, hear me, care about me, and love me despite my faults. Um, yeah, that's a really, really tough question. I'm gonna say for me, it's the same. And maybe I'm not healed enough to be able to come up with a better, not a better, because my answer is my answer, right? But maybe a more concrete answer. What I do know is that I give love the way that I want to receive it, which is why I found myself loving the wrong people because I love broken individuals and I try to fix them. I don't try to fix them. This is not something that I say to myself, hey, that guy, he needs some help. Go over there and start talking to him. But it just so happens that I end up connecting with people who are broken and innately I want to fix them. So I want to show them you are worthy. You're lovable. You're an amazing person despite your faults, and I'm going to love you no matter what, in hopes that they will give it back to me. Now, and I'm not consciously thinking that. It's just what ends up happening in relationships, unfortunately, for me.
Do you now my next question would be, do you think you're worthy of the love that you just described?
Absolutely, I'm worthy of it. I'm beyond worthy of it. Not only am I worth, okay, so yeah, that's my first answer, right? But deep down inside, I probably feel like I'm not. I beat myself up. I am the hardest on myself, harder on myself than I am on anybody else in the whole world. I hold myself to this high standard. And that's a good thing because it's gotten to me to where I am today. But when I'm laying in bed by myself, when I'm driving in the car, when I'm at the gym, the tears start to flow because I think, man, I really fucked that up, didn't I? God darn it. Why did I do that? Why can't I be this? Or, I sometimes even perseverate over a conversation that I might have had with a coworker or my children that I wish I did differently. And I beat myself up over that. And again, that's something that I think people who are born into or grow up in a little more of a secure, loving home don't struggle with as much as people like you and I.
In my 20s, I wasn't worthy of the type of love that I needed. Even though I was able to receive love, I was receiving love by people, to your point, that were broken in some way, or maybe parts of them were missing. And I always call that like the Humpty Dumpty syndrome, right? They fall in, and they need someone to piece them back together again. And that
Mm.
became me. And it sounds like in a lot of ways that became you. And what I found looking back in hindsight, the reason why I was maybe attracting or surrounding myself with people like that, it could be romantic, it could be platonic friendships, it was just acquaintances, is because I was using it as a distraction. So I don't have to do the work that was necessary for me to be better. Is that something that
I'm
you experience as well?
I'm so sorry to laugh, but yes, I believe as hard as that is to admit, I think that that would be a very accurate statement. It's easier for me to come in and fix you and help you and give you what you need rather than it is for me to face the fact that I'm broken. And that brokenness has hurt my children in some ways. And that brokenness still hurts my children in some ways, you know. But I also know that I love my kids and that no matter what, I will always do whatever I can to make sure that they're taken care of. They will never, ever, ever, there won't be a day on this gosh darn earth that they walk that they won't know that I love them. That's something I never had. And that's one thing that I will absolutely give. I might have made mistakes. I've done things that have hurt them. I've been with men that, you know, haven't been the best role models for them, but I'll always love them. And they know it. No matter what they do, they will always call me. I will always pick up the phone. I'll give them my last dollar. I'll stop whatever I'm doing and go get them. And they know that. And they're adult children right now. I have a 21 and a 25-year-old.
Why do you think so many of us put ourselves in that situation where we have, in a lot of ways, 100% control of it?
Why did we put ourselves in situations with like with people that are broken?
To avoid fixing ourselves when we can control that aspect of our life.
I really wish I had the answer to that. Can you tell me the answer to that, Tremaine? Because if
I
you
can tell
could,
you why I did it. Why I when I did it is I just wanted to be around people that were slightly better than me by whatever
Mm,
metric I was using. So they may have been far more damage and far more destructive to my life. But let's say if it's going to be romantic relationships, I know, okay, you know what? I'm around Donna. It's a warm body. It's someone I can at least have a conversation with. The conversation may be very surface level, but having a surface level conversation with someone is better than having a conversation within yourself a lot of times, or no conversation at all. Or if I wanted to do those drives, Donna's there. We may not be talking, we may not have a good relationship, but at least there's someone there. And I think as we unfortunately get older, in my observation, and when companionship means more to us than maybe, let's say, like marriage or a sexual connection, maybe, we tend to surround ourselves more and more with people that are unhealed because we're not healed. Like, how many times do you hear of women out there who, when you look at their friends, you begin to, especially if the woman is single, when you look at her friends, you begin to see that, okay, this friend is single, this friend is single, this friend is single. And then when you, let's say they were all married, right? You ask them, okay, when did you guys divorce? You know what's the timeline of the divorce for everyone? Is around the same, right? In a lot of cases, within the same year. Is that your observation as well? You're on mute.
I did. I muted because my phone was ringing. Uh, yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. I do think that it's like if they come in waves and they're all together. They definitely come in waves and they're all together. And I think, just like you, it's not that I felt like I wanted someone better, but yeah, a body, like the loneliness is hard. The loneliness is hard. And it's not that having anybody is better than a body, right? Than any, it's not like just anybody. There's things that are attractive about someone, you know, whether it's physical or maybe they could be a firefighter that's attractive, you know what I mean, that whatever the attraction might be. I think that just like you, it's, although you said someone better than you, right? Isn't that what you said? You
Yeah, so like based on like what I would was looking for. So let's say like I'll use my 20s because that decade was a huge struggle for me. And I was someone that didn't have a lot of money. So what I would do is someone that appeared to have some money, I would try to be around that person regardless of how maybe destructive their personality was,
mm,
because there was something that I was sensitive about. And here's someone who is quote unquote better than me because they have more resources, more money. So that's where there's a little bit of difficulty for me in my 20s, because I remember one time there was someone who I was around, a woman, and she came from a family that was pretty wealthy. And there's times where we would hang out and nothing happened, but there's a little bit of interest there from her side. She used to tell me, she's like, you can't walk away from me. Do you know who I am? I have this, I have that, I have that, right? So looking back, I understand why I did it, because it was a sensitive thing for me not having money. But now I'm around someone that comes from a family with money, but look at their behavior. They're using it to control people. And to a
mm,
degree, I was allowing that to happen just because she was better than me in an area that I was sensitive about.
yeah, yeah. I mean, well, money is always a big thing, but I definitely hear you. And I would say money was never, I never necessarily was attracted to people that had money. It was more people who have good relationships with their mothers. So odd. Or had, I always found myself like I would almost attach to the person's family. I found myself attaching to their family. And it was like sometimes it was hard to end a relationship because it was like, well, his mom is like a mom to me, you know? So if I lose him, now I'm losing another mother. So for me, it was more relational, but I can absolutely relate to, to kind of finding people who I can, or staying around people because of those relationships, if that makes sense.
It does. It's like you find something in someone that maybe you're lacking, and then you ignore everything else, right? There was someone who he found this girl attractive because he dates a specific, I forget where the girl was from, but he prefers to date girls from a specific part of the world,
Okay.
right? Very specific. He doesn't live there, but so he has to hope that they migrate over here, then he has to like go search them out.
Oh.
So when he found one, totally took him through the ringer, right? But he was so happy as it was happening, right? Like he's being abused, he's being mistreated in this way, and like just his the mask that he had, you would think that he was like kind of enjoying it because he was with what he wanted.
Mm.
But there's all this other behaviors, right? But it was, oh, for him, it was worth it. So be like, yeah, I did this. Yeah, this happened to me. Yeah, this and happened to me and everything. And someone that I knew that I used to work with, he mentioned he told me about situations. I was like, oh, I didn't know you knew that person. He's like, oh, did you hear how it ended? I was like, no. I was like, yeah, he came home one day and she was in bed with two other guys.
Mm.
So I'm like, so not one, but two. Right? Like, so
I
that was enough to break it. So it's interesting how as human beings we can connect with one type of behavior and not connect on 10 other ones, but because this one is so strong,
Hmm.
we ignore the other 10, right?
Yeah. And I would say too that my I have a different lens. So I see people like it's almost like my best trait, but my worst trait. I see the best in people and I overlook faults. That's such a great trait for a lot of reasons. But it's also a horrible trait because everyone around you is saying this person's bad. This person's bad. This person isn't good for you. What get away from this person. I can't believe that you're not seeing what's going on. And you're like, well, they're so sweet to me, or, he did this or she did this. Because it's not even only with relationships with men, it's friendships too. I've had friendships just like this, that I've tolerated horrible behavior. I've tolerated being abused and used and not seen and not heard and take. And I've like, well, they're going through a hard time, or they had a rough childhood, or they're just having a bad day. And it's always like an excuse. I always like try to see the best in people. And I think in the end, that's what ends up hurting me too. And I don't know where I got that from. I don't know what part of my abandonment caused that. But I am glad to have that trait. I'm glad that people can talk to me. I tend to be a person that people come to. Um, I have a lot of wisdom in dealing with life and how to get through life. And so when people come to me, I always seem to be able to give the best advice and the most reassuring, and I can calm them down and I can be that sounding board to them. Just to myself, not so much. Not to say
I
that I'm really all screwed up, just so you know. I'm just sharing
No, no,
some
you're
really.
perfectly fine, Donna. You're the best in the West.
I'm in the East.
In the East, there you go. You're not the least in the East. There you go.
There you.
I wonder how much of that is because you know what it feels like to be left and abandoned, so you don't want to impart those feelings on other people.
Yes, yes, yes. I've had girls living in my home that I've pulled from really bad situations. I've always tend to take care of those who I see. At one point, I've worked with troubled youth and, in the school district, trying to help those that are being abused, that are addicted to drugs, that are just getting out of jail, that are, I mean, like the horrors. It's so interesting because as I'm telling my stories of what I've experienced, truthfully, my stories are nothing compared to some of what's going on in this world and some of what other people have been through. And it's like I kind of have that imposter syndrome to some degree. Like I said to my producer, I was like, God, I feel terrible because while these things are really horrible, I know a girl who's, was burned, or, you know what I mean? Like just really, really horrible physical things or emotional, or, just pretty horrific abuse that happens. And mine, and by no means is the worst. I know that.
So before we close, Donna, if you can give some advice to some people who are trying to overcome some of the struggles or trauma of, let's say, their childhood or their teenage years to make sure they're not seeking out those same difficulties in others, what would you tell them and why?
So I had mentioned earlier that I feel like therapy is a great outlet. I feel like working out is also a really, really good outlet. What I think really has been, I don't want to say the most impactful, what I feel like has gotten me beyond those two has been meditation, has been listening at night to guided meditation, falling asleep to it, to taking time for myself and shutting the rest of the world out and just paying attention to my body. We have our nervous system, and we have our, the way that our nervous system works. We have three different phases where we are feel calm and safe. We have fight or flight, and then we have the dorsal where we like, are kind of play dead. I think paying attention to your body, I'm following my gut has never, ever, ever, ever done me wrong. And when you're in a situation with someone, or in any situation, whether you're with someone, whether you're at somewhere, a certain job that you're at, um, and your body doesn't feel right, leave, run, listen to your body. That's my advice. Listen to your body because it will always, always, always tell you the truth.